My name is Jason, and if you told me years ago that I'd have Riley back in my life, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are, complicated, messy, and tied together in ways neither of us really planned. To understand how we got here, though, I need to start from the beginning. I met Riley in college. She wasn't just the prettiest girl in the room. She was the most magnetic person I'd ever met. She had this way of drawing people in. Her laugh, her confidence, the way she could make you feel like you were the center of her world. I wasn't immune. From the moment I met her, I was hooked. At first, I thought there might be something between us. She gave just enough to make me think there could be. She'd text me late at night, asking if I wanted to study together, or if I could help her fix a problem she didn't understand. She'd lean into me during group work, touching my arm or playing with her hair when she talked. Sometimes she'd even say things like, "Why can't all guys be like you, Jason?" But then, she'd turn around and gush about some frat guy she was seeing. Or worse, she'd cancel our plans to go hang out with someone else. It was a constant cycle of hope and letdown, and I hated myself for falling for it every time. Once, during a party, she found me sitting outside. She was tipsy, her cheeks flushed from the cold and alcohol. She plopped down next to me, resting her head on my shoulder. "You're such a good guy," she said softly. "The best guy I know. Why aren't all men like you?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my heart from leaping out of my chest. "Maybe you just haven't been looking in the right places." She lifted her head, her hazel eyes locking on mine for a moment that felt like eternity. Then, just as I thought she might, "Lean in," she laughed. "Don't get any ideas, Jason. You're like my brother." That line, it crushed me. But the worst part? I still stuck around. I told myself it was enough to just be near her. Deep down, though, I was waiting for her to wake up and see me for who I was. After college, we drifted apart. I focused on my career, channeling all that frustration into building something of my own. My mentorship program took off, turning me into a respected name in the business world. I thought I'd moved on from Riley, buried those feelings in the grind of work. But then she called. She was starting a tech startup, and things weren't going well. She was out of money, out of options, and she needed help. "You were the first person I thought of," she said. "You've always been so good at fixing things." Hearing her voice stirred up everything I thought I'd buried. I wanted to tell her no, to let her figure it out on her own, but I didn't. I told her to come over. At first, it was strictly business. I connected her with some of my contacts, helped her refine her pitch, and gave her tough love advice that most people paid good money for. But Riley had a way of breaking down walls without even trying. She'd stay late after our work sessions, pouring us glasses of wine and reminiscing about college. It felt easy, familiar, and dangerously comfortable. One night, after too much wine, she kissed me. I didn't stop her. Years of pent-up emotion spilled over, and for a moment, it felt like everything I'd ever wanted. But when it was over, reality hit. Riley wasn't suddenly in love with me. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something else entirely. Riley and I fell into a routine. She'd come to me for help, advice, connections, anything to get her business off the ground. And sometimes, we'd fall into bed. It wasn't love, not for her, but it wasn't purely transactional either. It was messy and undefined, and we both knew it. We became friends with benefits, though not in the typical sense. She wasn't staying for passion or romance. She stayed because she needed my help. My advice, my contacts, my insight, those were what she truly valued. And she offered me just enough intimacy to keep me from pulling away completely. But over time, I started to notice something different. Riley wasn't just taking, she was giving. She'd show up with my favorite coffee, or take the time to cook dinner for us after a long day. She started asking about my work, genuinely interested in what I was doing. It wasn't much, but it was a shift. A small sign that maybe I wasn't just a convenience to her. When her business hit its first major milestone, she insisted on taking me out to celebrate. "None of this would have been possible without you," she said over dinner, her eyes meeting mine with something deeper than gratitude. For the first time, it felt like she truly saw me, not just as the guy who fixed her problems, but as someone who mattered to her. Between relationships, Riley always came back to me. She'd vent about her latest breakup, and I'd listen, biting back the urge to say, "I told you so," but the dynamic shifted subtly. She didn't talk about these guys with the same starry-eyed excitement she used to. Instead, she'd compare them to me. The way I treated her, the way I understood her. It was as if she was starting to realize that the chaos she once craved didn't hold the same appeal anymore. One night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Why didn't you ever give me a chance?" I asked, my voice quiet but firm. She froze, her body tense against mine. "Jason, I didn't want to ruin what we had." I laughed bitterly. "What we had? You mean me being your backup plan while you chased after guys who treated you like crap?" Her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, maybe. "It wasn't like that," she said softly. "I knew you'd always be there for me, and I didn't want to lose you. By keeping me at arm's length, I pressed. By making me feel like I wasn't good enough?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat up, pulling the sheet around her. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said finally. "I was scared. You were safe, Jason. Too safe." Her words stung, but they also made sense in a way I didn't want to admit. Riley had spent her life chasing chaos, drawn to people who were as unstable as she felt inside. I'd been the opposite. Stable, dependable, the one thing she could count on. And in her mind, that had never equaled romance. Despite the tension, we didn't stop. Riley's business started to find its footing, thanks to my guidance and her relentless drive. She kept coming to me, not just for advice, but for the connection we'd built, however flawed it was. I knew she needed me more than I needed her, but I wasn't ready to let her go. Over time, though, the imbalance started to weigh on me. I set boundaries, encouraging her to handle meetings on her own, to solve problems without leaning on me so heavily. She resisted at first, but eventually she rose to the challenge. Slowly, she began to stand on her own. Our friends with benefits dynamic continued, but it shifted. It wasn't about power anymore, or guilt, or unresolved feelings. It became something more honest, a connection that neither of us could fully define but didn't want to lose. I don't know what the future holds for us. Maybe one day, Riley will figure out what she really wants. Or maybe we'll drift apart again, this time for good. But for now, we've found a strange kind of balance. It's not perfect, but it's ours. And for now, that's enough.